It's huge.
Now, you may be super confused like my husband was when he came home to this. All of our sheets and towels wrapped in plastic wrap around my yoga ball. See, every now and then I get a cosplay idea that I just can't get out of my head. Recently, it was Primo Jim-chan. Now it's Rimuru Tempest, but not just his regular human form. I want to be a slime. I want to make a cosplay big enough for me to fit inside and jump around in all my slimy goodness. Obviously, the cosplay can't actually be made out of slime, so I had to figure out some things before I got started. Number 1, what to make it out of. Number 2, how to keep the cost down. And number 3, how to keep it small enough to A, store in a small apartment, and B, transport to cons. And to figure out what to make it out of, I wanted to visualize what the cosplay would look like. So that's how we get to this wrap sheet monstrosity here. If you saw my last video, you know that I'm working on a Rimuru as a slime cosplay, so I can jump around in all my slime glory. After visualizing what my cosplay would look like, I decided foam would be the best material. Now I needed to make a pattern. I tried making a small model with things around the house. It didn't work out, so I moved on to Play-Doh. I covered it in saran wrap and tape, then I used a Sharpie and marked up where I would be cutting. After my Play-Doh pattern turned out not so good, I remade my model with air dry clay. This took like 3 days to dry. But eventually I had a new pattern. This pattern looks so much better. Now I needed to scale it up to what the real size would look like. The minimum requirement was just that I fit in it when I crouched down, kind of like this. I went back and forth with how big I wanted to make it, but eventually settled on something after some help from my brother. But now there was a new problem. When I did the math to scale it up, there was not enough foam. And I needed to keep the cost down. I could not drop another $100 on just more foam. I had 4 rolls to work with. After giving myself a headache, I made it work with an adjustment to the pattern. It meant more work, but after hours of scanning, making grids, tracing, and scaling to the correct size, I finally had my pattern. So, time to set it up. I laid it all down like puzzle pieces. Sorry you can't see all of it, my apartment's too small. This took a long time, but I don't have a projector. I might invest in one if I make another big cosplay. After setting up, I cut and glued all the papers together, trying to line them up as best as I could. 5 hours of this later, maybe more, I was finally done. I'm working on a Rimuru cosplay so I can become a slime without the reincarnation part. This is part 3 of making a slime cosplay. Last time you saw me set up my pattern and cut it all out. Next was to cut out all the foam. I was very excited for this. First, I had to arrange 4 pattern pieces per foam, then pin them all down. When they were just how I wanted them, I traced with a thin Sharpie and marked all the seams where they should match. As you can see here, I cut my finger. I had never worked with 2-inch foam, and I only had this type of box cutter, the orange one. Figured I needed some that would be longer, and I got this pink one. New box cutters are super sharp, and I left them out while I was cleaning, slicing my finger with one. My nail stopped the knife from going deeper. So, you know, be more careful than me. Anyways, these worked out great. I could cut all the way through it and carve out any errors. So with some motivation from my cat, I got through all 16 pieces in a day. I was in pain the next day from working on the floor. I got bad knees, so I needed a break. Look at all the 16 pieces. Aren't they beautiful? Time to assemble it so I can start taking shape. Welcome back to another Rimuru as a Slime cosplay update. This is part 4. After hours of frying my brain over how to make this, several models of the shape that it should look like, and many pattern adjustments until I had them just right, I scaled up my pattern, assembled it, cut it, and transferred it onto the foam. About 5 hours of this later, I had 16 pieces that needed to be glued together. I thought cutting them was hard, gluing the foam together was the real nightmare. To get started, I got some spray adhesive and laid them down according to the numbers where they would be glued together. 1 and 2, then 3 and 4, you get it, but it turned out a failure. At the sign of any pulling or bending, they would get holes or completely split apart. So I had to glue them all again. This time I added a ton of glue and waited longer in between gluing. It made the pieces heavier, but they were really sturdy. Now that I had figured out the gluing, it was time to do the rest. This took several afternoons as I had to spray the glue in a small area, wait, push the 2 pieces together, then wait an hour to spray more glue. So it was long. A week later of gluing during my free time, and I finally had 2 pieces. Now it was time to shape it. With box cutters and scissors, I smoothed out the sharp edges. I want Rimuru to be as organic looking as possible, as he would be a squishy ball of slime. 2.5 hours later, I had my Rimuru slime. Finally, with no time to spare before Fanime, I finished the Rimuru as a slime cosplay. It was a long journey, so let's continue from where I left off. If you watched any of my last videos on making this cosplay, I mentioned I had 3 criteria. 3 was how to keep it small enough to A, store in a small apartment, and B, transport to cons. So first I tried some industrial strength Velcro. The idea was that if Rimuru could split into 2 parts, then I could fold him and it would make it easier for transporting and storage. But all of it ripped off when separating it into 2 parts. I left it on hold and moved on to the eyes. I drew them several times, cut them, and glued some see-through fabric on. Next, I draped my fabric, pinned it down, and darted where I needed. So the darts, pinned and glued the fabric onto the foam on both parts. Now it was back to the Velcro. Based on some advice from TikTok, I decided to use contact cement. But because the Velcro had some foam still stuck on it, I had to add contact cement to soften the foam and scrape it off. Then I could add more contact cement and glue it onto Rimuru. Once both parts were done, I glued the edges with E6000 and hot glue. Now, before I did anything to Rimuru, I would always test it with scraps. Regardless, it seems I missed something because when Rimuru was assembled, the Velcro will pull apart. I brainstormed about it and came up with a solution. Zippers? I was not too sure about this, so I asked TikTok. I bought weighted and tried some of the suggestions. The magnets were too thick to be on top of the fabric and not strong enough to be under the fabric, and I could not figure out the zipper by the yard, so back to hand sewing zippers I went. Each zipper took about an hour to an hour and a half. There are 4 in total. By the time I finished, I was super tired, but so happy to be done. A ton of hours of work later, about $350 poorer, and physical pain throughout, I finally had the slime of my dreams. If this is the first time you're seeing the making of my slime cosplay, just so you know, this is about a year old now. I decided it needed to be re-recorded just so that I could finally post it on YouTube. If you like seeing what weird stuff I'm up to, I recommend you stick around and see what I come up with next.